What's up, y'all? Inside Carolina Live. I'm Joey Powell for a special edition of the Coast to Coast, or I don't know, maybe this is shooting it straight, maybe this is coasting it straight, or shooting it coast. I don't know what you want to call it, but we're doing a special show this week because of the holiday, and we felt like we felt like Sherrell and Sean didn't know enough about the Maui Invitational, so we went and found a guy that had a little bit of personal experience with us. JJax is going to join us tonight. You know him from, well, one for his years at UNC and getting a natty, but you also know him from the Shooting It Straight podcast he does with John Bauman here on IC. Well, we're going to try this, and it's going to be fun. So all of you are going to be in here live tonight. We're going to let it rip. We are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. And to get started tonight, we do have a short, very short, brief recruiting update. I'm going to throw this to Sherrell so we can kind of lean into the current team stuff for most of the show today. So, Sherrell, I know you posted a brief update today on the premium board. You don't want to give away premium info, but if you want to give everybody a quick reset, I'm sure the folks would appreciate to hear it as we get rolling.
Well, since we have Justin on here, and it's a much different time than it was. Justin, if you had the ability to bring NIL into like 2016, 2017, I'm curious your response on this. Like, how would you have handled trying to mix the business with like trying to become a better player? Because I think a lot of guys are business first, 100%, and that's certainly their right to do that. But I'm curious, like for someone like yourself, how do you think you would have tried to handle that? Because I'm sure it's something you thought about, like with the way things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that's kind of glad that I didn't have to go through that. From the standpoint of like I always had my goals set to make it to the next level. You throw money into the aspect of your day-to-day lives, and I think it kind of changes things up a little bit, whether going back to the gym or doing a photo shoot for 50K or um, just certain little appearance that you might do. I think for me, my parents always gave me a great, they kind of kept me in check when it came to, am I keeping the main thing the main thing? And I don't think that would have necessarily changed. But like you said, it's a different time. I mean, we had to make it to the NBA to make the kind of money that some of these guys are making in college now. So, um, I don't really know. I can't sit here and say, oh, you know what? I'd still be going back to the gym every single night and I wouldn't be worried about all this money. Uh, we would have brought in a lot of money whenever I was there. And so, it probably would have been a little more difficult, a little more distracting, but I like to think that I'd be able to keep, everything in perspective.
Well, thank you for answering that because I did put you on the spot. We didn't talk about that at all pre-show because Joey didn't tell me he was going to ask a recruiting question, so we're all just on our heels here. But
You're a vet, man. This is a 3 game and 3 day situation. I need you on your toes. I need you ready to rep no matter what.
Yeah, I can go 120 minutes over the next 3 games, so I'm good to go. So I think you can kind of glean what the update on the premium board is about based upon the question that I asked Justin. But it does involve Caleb Wilson and AJ DeBonsta, UNC's two really remaining targets, I would say, in the 2025 class. UNC is working behind the scenes, doing a lot of things, trying to get those guys on campus. So I think that is the gist of the update, is that nothing has materially changed, I would say, in their recruitments, but they are both UNC's after both of them very strongly. Let's put it that way. And we'll see. They both have decisions or are expected to make decisions here in the next, I would say, month and a half. So we'll see what happens. I think the big thing for Hubert Davis and the staff is once they get through Maui, once they get through kind of the Alabama game and they get the exam break, that's typically when coaches go back out on the road recruiting. So we'll be curious to see if they see Utah Prep wherever they're playing or if they see Holy Innocents down in Atlanta at some point.
Well, I appreciate that, man, and I appreciate you working with me. Sometimes we have to call an audible in the middle of a game, and I appreciate you rolling with it. So everybody pay attention to that. If you're not a premium subscriber, this is probably a really good time to make that happen. Football has a lot of things going on behind the scenes y'all probably want to be up to date on, so go ahead and make that premium subscription. If you don't have one, get one. Treat yourself for a little treat yourself for the holidays. Now let's talk about what everybody's here to talk about. Dang it. We got a big, and I mean like this Maui field is more loaded than like a basket of Linda's cheese fries, right? So there is some absolute nightmarish teams, and it's only 8. But again, if you think about the other bracket is uh, Memphis, Michigan State, uh, Connecticut, and Colorado. Nothing to sneeze at, especially when you consider the reigning 2-time national champion. On UNC's side of the bracket, they've got Dayton, they've got Iowa State, they've got Auburn. There are 4 teams in the top 11, 3 of the top 5, and it's absurd how great this field has come together for North Carolina's trip out to the islands. And obviously you guys know about the wildfires that really ravaged that island last year, and so it's probably really good for these folks to be able to see some ball, knowing they're still rebuilding and knowing they're still trying to get a lot of their lives back. I don't mind to say personally, it's one of my favorite islands, a great vacation spot. So I'm excited to see this team go out and perform not only for the natives, but to be able to perform in an absolutely stacked field. So before we start digging in, I'm going to give a little bit of a preview of each one of the teams that North Carolina's likely to see. And this is the best college basketball podcast that features 2 guys named Sean and Sherrell. So we're going to try to give you a high level of analysis here, and specifically since we got Justin, who, maybe he still has his winning surfboard or whatever it was they give out for winning the tournament. Maybe he can lean on that a little bit. But the first game North Carolina is going to see is against Dayton. If you look at Dayton, they're ironically one of the oldest teams in the NCAA. They average 3 years of experience in college ball, which is not something you see very much anymore. They're not a big team. They're incredibly athletic. Sean, I'm going to come to you first. What do you see in a game against a team like Dayton, and where do you think North Carolina's potential problems might be?
Well, I think you hit it on the head with their experience, especially from the guard perspective. But you look at their stats, and three-point shooting isn't their forte, but they did hit 10 threes last game. So they do have a few players that can definitely get it up. So it's going to be a tough matchup. Dayton, especially from a defensive perspective, will get at you. They have some athleticism. They have some strength. I think they're going to try to attack, the front court, similar to what we saw in the Hawaii game. But I think it's going to come down to UNC's guards, like we're going to say for probably most of the tournament. And if they can get out in transition and kind of get this up and down, especially more to their pace than Dayton's pace, I think they'll be able to ideally take care of business. But it is an important game just to, either way, win or lose, they're going to get Auburn, Iowa State, which I know we'll get to in a second. But this game is going to be physical. It's going to be tough, and it's definitely a challenging opening matchup. But UNC's guard should be able to get out in transition, and get out and make a difference in this game.
Justin, I think about Dayton. Like historically, I feel like they all have a bunch of dudes built just like you, like that 6'6" to 6'9", very wiry, very wingy, very long wingspans, can shoot a lot. There's a guy named Zed Key that I think a lot of Tar Heel fans might recognize his name. But Justin, how do you prepare for a team like that brings you a lot of that real athleticism, but more importantly, they're so rangy, like they can really get out and guard you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, kind of looking at this team, going back to your point as far as the UNC guard play, I think we're going to talk about that the whole year, not just this tournament. I think that's kind of what's going to make this team go. I mean, obviously, you would love to see some bigs kind of step in and kind of take that, solidified role. But the strength of this team is the guard play. And I think when you have guys that are maybe taller, longer, they might be more athletic. I think you have to take advantage of them on the defensive end. You've got guys like Seth, Elliott, even Drake, Ian, guys that can really get into you and into ball handlers. And being one of those guys that didn't like little pests and little guards getting up in me, I think that's kind of what you have to do, is take advantage of that, make them uncomfortable, pressure them. And we've seen throughout the start of this season how when they pick up the pressure, the game totally changes and their offense looks different. They're able to get out in transition way more and not play against a set defense, which will probably be more difficult against this Dayton team because they are more athletic on that end. So I think that's kind of where you take advantage of them. I'm interested to see, because I kind of looked up some stats, and UNC shot 115 free throws in the first 4 games, which is an unbelievable amount of free throws. But then you look at Dayton, and they've shot 121 through 5 games. So I think the matchup of the guards and being able to keep guys out of the paint, being able to guard your own man, not having to help, not having to, bring weak side over all the time. I think that's kind of the matchup that I'm looking forward to, is who's going to kind of win that battle. And I think UNC has the guards to be able to do that.
Yeah, they definitely have elite speed and really really strong play from the guards, and especially if they can get into their their 3-point shooting comfort zone, I guess. Sherrell.
Yeah, following up on what Justin said about free throws and kind of how this game will be won at the defensive end. We're going to talk every podcast. The guards are going to be a topic, and defense leading to rebounding, leading to transition, which leads to getting the other team tired, is also going to be a topic in pretty much every podcast. But what I'm really looking forward to or want to see, Nate Santos is a very good player. He's built strongly. He's tall. He's a tall shooter. So kind of one of those unicorn guys like Justin was. Like when you're 6'7" and can shoot, it's a very difficult cover. So I'm looking forward to, and we talked about this last time, I'm looking forward to Drake Powell getting a lot of minutes. And I want Hubert Davis to just say, Drake, go handle Nate. Like, that's your cover. Don't worry about anything else. If you grab a rebound, great. If you're able to get a layup, great. But your job is to stick to this guy and not let him, kill UNC from 3, because he's a really, really good shooter. Like I said, he's strong. So I think that is a matchup I'm looking forward to, because, in addition to Drake, I also have Jalen Withers, who they put on him, and he rotates between the 3 and the 4. So at sometimes he'll have, maybe Ian Jackson on him. Sometimes he'll have Seth Trimble on him. Sometimes he'll have Jalen Withers, and sometimes he'll have Drake Powell. So to me, he is their most potent, perimeter scorer. So if you can kind of cut him off and limit what he can do, then it's going to be hard for them, to score from the outside, which, as we saw against Hawaii, albeit Dayton's a better opponent, it's really difficult to beat a team like UNC if you're not hitting a ton of outside shots.
Yeah, I think there's something also to be said for Dayton in the sense that they're willing to run. I mean, they're top 50 in Ken Palm's offensive efficiency so far. They're actually, I think they're probably lower in tempo, but they're good in offensive efficiency. I think specifically what's a little bit puzzling is they don't shoot the 3 very well. I think they're 250 to 300 in that range as far as how well they shoot from deep. But it'll be interesting to see how North Carolina starts this tournament out. I would love to see them go fairly deep. You saw Coach Davis play 11 players against Hawaii and Honolulu the other night. I think that especially with a potential 3-game in 3-day situation, you need to get into that depth, and it's going to be really intriguing to see how he deploys those guys, especially early on in the first game. Second thing I want to get to is talking about, if North Carolina beats Dayton, they're going to play the winner of Iowa State and Auburn. If they lose to Dayton, they're going to play the loser of Iowa State and Auburn. And both of those teams, again, are top 10 teams. And depending on who you look at, they're both incredibly great defensively. So let's kind of look at either one of those options. Iowa State is absolutely amazing at protecting the basketball in the NCAA. UNC is first as far as lowest number of turnovers per game, but Iowa is still really close there. They're also Iowa State, not Iowa. Iowa State's also top 15 in just about everything in Ken Palm's 4 factors. They're probably going to really, really look to slow them down or slow North Carolina down. So it's going to be interesting to watch that. Sherrell, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think that North Carolina's focus should be against a team like Iowa State that they do a lot of things really, really well?
Yeah, Oltenberger, I can't say that I've watched a ton of Iowa State games over the years, but I know what they do. And what they do better than anything is suffocate you defensively. They don't allow you to get into your actions. They don't allow you to get in transition. They make every shot difficult. So I think that is a situation where if it turns into a grinded out half-court game, if they do play Iowa State either way, like you really need RJ Davis to kind of be on his game as far as creating shots that other people can't. Because even though he's struggling, we've still seen RJ Davis basically like take over games when the flow of the offense is destroyed or when sets are messed up. He just freelances and does his thing and is able to score. Now, Elliot Cadeau is doing it a lot this year as well, but I think RJ definitely has the potential of a breakout in that type of game, just because of it's going to be so tight and constricted that you're going to have to do things outside of the normal confines of the offense. So for me, like at least offensively, like that's the key. Is just being able to freelance a little bit and improv against a defense that you know is going to like smother you.
Justin, what's the difference in an approach like that, especially when you're on a short turnaround? You don't have a ton of time for a real scout. What's your approach as a player against a team that you know is probably going to be very, very deliberate defensively? They're probably going to get up into you a lot, and they're probably going to really make it hard for you to get what you're used to getting in your own offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's these tournaments, they give you a challenge from the standpoint of trying to keep your mind on each game at a time, right? So for them, it's okay. We've got Dayton coming up. Like we talked about it, they're long, athletic, um, but you can take advantage of them in certain areas. Then you move on to a team in Iowa State or Auburn, Iowa State for this case, and defensively they're going to, like you said, suffocate you, pressure you, try to take you out of your offense. I think with what helps this team so much, and you're going to need an RJ Davis to make shots, create a lot of open space for other players. But the way their offense plays, I think, plays to that. When I think back to the years when I was there, when we played defenses like Virginia and just other teams that really just tried to slow you down and keep you, out of the offense that you want to run, we struggled at times because of having bigs always down there in the paint. Right. So now you look at this offense and you've got basically 5-out spacing most of the time. So whenever you come off of a pick and roll, you're not worried about a big clogging up the paint necessarily. With this team, if they are, then that means there's somebody open in the corner or on the wing. So I think sticking to their game plan of kind of how you saw in that Kansas game in the second half of how they just spread them out, high pick and roll, leave those driving lanes open for the guards. I think that's probably the biggest thing. But at the same time, you just got to stick to who you are. And, you obviously have a scout. Hey, these are the
Sean,
strengths and these are the guys that do that. But you got to stick to it.
Sorry about that. Sean, I want to ask you, when you see a team like Iowa State who typically scores a ton off of their own creating turnovers and score a ton off of that, knowing what, TJ Otzelberger wants to do with his roster, how are you thinking North Carolina should prepare for Iowa State, if that's who they draw?
Well, I think for Iowa State, I could see Ian Jackson being really important. I mean, he's going to be important in all the games, but I think really important in this game, just given their defensive pressure, extremely strong 3 guards in terms of Iowa State, and then, the bigs are tall and efficient. So in terms of preparing, I think the guard matchup is going to be fantastic. I'd say one stat that really jumps out to me in terms of similarities. You think of Iowa State and playing slow, playing physical, but they're number 5 in terms of tempo length on the offensive end, and then they grind you to a halt on the defensive end, which UNC's numbers are fairly similar this year. So I think it's going to be, especially in that first 10, 15 seconds, what type of shots can you force them away from defensively? And then offensively, getting out in transition, UNC has been, I think, getting better each game. It's nice to see some 3-on-2, 2-on-1 execution against Hawaii, beating them with the pass. But Iowa State is 99th percentile defensively in transition, so that's going to be another battle. But I do think Ian Jackson, just his ability to create off the dribble, make space, make shots. So I think he could have a big impact off the bench for this game where, if they're playing Auburn, maybe Joey Powell has a chance to do a little better given more of the free-flowing athletic nature of that game.
Come back to you real quick, Justin, because I think Sean hit on something that makes me a little bit curious. How tough is a situation like this for a freshman? Regardless of what kind of credentials he or she may come into an MTE like this with, how do you think this affects a freshman? You're away from home. There's so many distractions. You're in a really cool place that you've probably never been before. Oh, and by the way, you've got 72 hours to play 3 grueling matchups in a smoky hot high school gym.
Yeah, I mean, it's you got to think of every single game that they play. It's a new experience, right? It's a different game of basketball that they've ever played. I think thankfully for them, they had that Kansas game and it hit about every experience that you could think of, whether it's environment, hostility, great team, size, speed, strength, totally different than high school. But it's different, like you said, you play a Dayton team, and then all of a sudden you have to play one of the top 5 teams. And then if you make it through that, you got to play the team that just won the national championship last year that, in my opinion, looks like they have a really good chance to make another run again. So as a freshman, it's it's a learn as you go experience, and I think hopefully we've seen spurts of it, and everybody knows Ian is kind of being that just go get a bucket type of guy. You're going to need a guy like him for sure in one of these games to kind of go off. And so hopefully, I think that the coaching staff has done a good job with everybody, but especially the freshmen, and trying to help them and their maturity as the games go on. So hopefully it can kind of lead to some bigger games in this tournament, because it's going to be tough. 3 games, and like you said, I've never sweat that much ever in basketball than when I played in Maui. So hopefully they can rest up, hydrate, and get ready to go.
And maybe it's one of those situations too where the freshmen don't know what they don't know, so they're just kind of blind and figuring it out as they go along. Next on the preview page, let's look at Auburn. And when I see Auburn, first off, we all know how people have feelings about Bruce Pearl or whatever. Set those aside. Right now, Auburn's the best field goal shooting team in the NCAA. They're in top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, and they defend at an incredibly high level. Justin, I'll throw to you right back to you, and then we'll get Sean and Sherrell as well. What do you do when you're coming up against a team like this early? I think everybody knows Kansas because they had the #1 ranking beside their names, and they've got national championship aura. But I think Auburn may have probably a more taxing and demanding matchup right now for North Carolina if that's who they end up seeing. What's the mindset going against an elite team that is great on both ends of the floor, and seemed that they haven't had much resistance so far this year? I mean, they went to Houston and walked the dog on Houston like it was no big thing. So what's your approach against a team like Auburn?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think one word to describe a matchup like that is physicality. When you go against a team that's coached by Bruce Pearl, whether you like him or not, the physicality that you're going to have on both ends of the floor is going to be different than a lot of games you've played. And they've got size, they've got athleticism. Like you said, field goal percentage wise, I mean, they're #1 and getting it done on that end. But then you have to guard and then come down and try to score against a defense that's, I mean, they're not giving up much at all. So I think it's the same mindset. I mean, you got to be physical. You got to be able to match their intensity. It's a game of runs, but you can't give in to some of their runs that they might have. So I think having that mindset, if you can regroup from the first game and move on to the game against Auburn, if that's who they play, having the mindset of, okay, we've got to be the team that hits first. We got to be the team that's more physical, whatever that might look like in the game. I think if they do that, everything else will fall in line.
Sean, when you see a team like Auburn, and they're going to be physical, and I think what North Carolina may have struggled with the most against Hawaii was that physicality. You alluded to it a little bit earlier in the show. What do you think it's going to take for them from a game plan to kind of crack what Auburn wants to do? Because again, they've always been a fairly good post team, but now you see they've also got a team that is really good on effective field goal percentage and does kind of what they want offensively as well. So what's the game plan there? I think Justin nailed the mindset. I'm asking you, what's the game plan?
Well, yeah, Auburn extremely talented. You guys mentioned the size, especially in that starting lineup, and then they have Elliot Godot's former AAU teammate coming off the bench, who, he could get 20 off the bench pretty quickly just with his ability in Pettiford. But in terms of the game plan, I would say, on Elliot Godot and his ability to push the pace, push the tempo, Auburn, given the athleticism, given the size, they're almost like, when UNC has played Michigan State in the past, I feel they're one of the few Big Ten teams that will run with UNC. And Auburn, with those athletes, I think they're going to, play at a faster tempo than what they're currently ranked. So I think if you're Godot, you're able to get out in transition, push the pace, use your speed and crossover to be the aggressor offensively. I think that can create open looks for, whether it's RJ, the big man, etc. But I think that's going to be the big game plan piece to watch is, how is Cadeau doing against their size and their aggressive defense? And then in terms of defensively for UNC, it's almost, Justin mentioned playing at Kansas, and I think having that Hunter Dickinson experience is going to help because they're going to look to go down to Johnny Broom down low and see what they can do. They're going to look to crash the boards, etc. So I think it's going to take that collective effort from a team, but then I think it is going to go to that depth that they do have. I mentioned Drake Powell previously. I do think he could be an X factor in this game with his size, his length, his versatility, and I think this game could be a little more free flowing where he's not in that 12, 15-foot range. He's able to get to the basket and use that explosiveness and athleticism, which we haven't really seen that much. So really, it starts with Elliot Cadeau in my mind for that game, but Drake Powell off the bench will be really important too.
Sherrell, if you're Hubert Davis, who would you rather play? I know you don't get a choice, but who do you think is a better matchup for North Carolina, Iowa State or the Tigers?
I'd probably prefer to play Auburn just because of the points that Sean and Justin made, and that like Iowa State, their whole vibe is to like suffocate, and Auburn, while they try to do it differently, they do it, I guess, more from an open court perspective, whereas like Iowa State wants to play on half court. That's what they want to do. They want to grind you. They want to keep it relatively low scoring. Now Auburn will do that, but I think Bruce Pearl has no issue with going up tempo and playing fast. So I think from the way your roster is built, it sounds strange to say, from the way your roster is built, you probably would prefer Auburn, although Auburn probably has the biggest mismatch that you'll have in the entire tournament potentially with Broom against UNC's front line. We all know Houston has a bunch of things that Joey loves. Joey, what were your favorite thing in sports? What are they?
DAWGS.
Yes,
Dogs.
Houston has a bunch of adults, a bunch of dogs who are 23, 24, 25 years old. At some
grown dogs.
They have grown man strength. And Broom had 20 points, I believe it was, 9 rebounds, and 5 blocks. So he like dominated inside the paint against Houston. And Houston is probably the benchmark for toughness maybe in the entire country. So it's not saying anything against UNC's front line, but from the results we've seen through 4 games, that is problematic. So I say all that to say I think if you gave him true serve, he would prefer to play Auburn, but Auburn does present a unique challenge that no other team really, I think, in this tournament presents to Carolina.
And when you've got guys that are as old as Houston has, and Auburn is fairly up there in age too. I mean, I think you're talking about it's no longer strength; it's scrumph, is how you would pronounce it, because when you get to be old, you got to call it scrumph. You can't just say strength anymore.
Yeah, and one thing, Vin Allen Lubin. Now, granted, his team got destroyed in the game, like absolutely annihilated. They lost by 28, I think. But he had
balled.
He had like 17 and 13
Yeah.
against that front line at Vanderbilt against Auburn last year. So he has some familiarity. Again, he is not a young guy either. Like he's a advanced, strong, adult. So between him and Jalen, you would think they would be able to at least, provide some resistance. And that's really all Carolina needs from the front line with the way the guards are playing. It's just some resistance, get in the way, use your fouls, and be competent rebounding.
So that leaves us to the final third game that UNC would potentially play, assuming if they find a way to win the first 2. I'm not going to preview the entire other side of the bracket because I feel like it's a bit of a fool's errand, but I'm going to assume that UConn gets through there unscathed. UConn is as I mentioned earlier, two-time defending national champion, 17-game winning streak. Again, going back to some of Sean's favorite metrics, they're top 10 in the country in both offensive and defensive adjusted efficiency. They shoot the ball well. They defend really well. They offensive rebound like it's nobody's business. Sean, is this one of those where you just hope North Carolina goes in and acquits themselves well? Do you think there's actually a chance they could beat a team like UConn if they were to, some things were to break their way?
Well, last year for the UConn game, that was probably one of the things I've been most wrong about. But I'm going to say the same things in terms of everything that UConn lost last year. And obviously they did very well in the transfer portal, as well as getting some freshmen in McNeely. So super competitive. Obviously, and Danny Hurley as a coach and what he runs offensively is extremely impressive. But I do think there's so many new pieces, obviously outside of Caravan, and you have Solomon Jones, who had a great game last year against UNC. But there are a lot of new pieces. They haven't played anybody yet, so I do think some of that experience for UNC could definitely come in handy this year. And I think UConn is going to be a team that continues to get better, but UNC had the matchup with them last year, so they have a little familiarity with the style of play that they're going to run. And once again, I do think it is just UConn trying to adapt a lot of new people to that system, which I'm not as scared of UConn as I think everybody is making them out to be. I think a very talented team, but with UNC's guard play, as we say it again, like they have a chance to push the tempo and be the aggressor. And I think from a front court perspective, UConn and with Sampson and Terrace Reed, very tall, can block shots, but I think Jalen Washington and Withers and Van Allen Lubin could handle that younger front line. So I think when you look at it, the guards for UNC have more experience and should be the ones that are coming out on top. So I think if they do face off at UConn, whatever stage that may be, they should feel pretty good and have a confidence going into that game.
Sherrell, you see anything that makes you think UNC could actually hang with Terrace Reed and Caravan and those guys? I mean, UConn's a very, very big team, and North Carolina is, as we've said 1,000 times ad nauseum on this show, that North Carolina's a bit on the smaller side, not just from the personnel they play, but the way that they play. Anything that makes you think that they could potentially hang with or break UConn's streak if they get a chance to play them?
Sure. I mean, Carolina's a talented team. Like I think because of whatever limitations we all believe they have at the 5 mostly, I would say at the 4, but at the 5 mostly, I think we've kind of overcorrected and just kind of seen like, oh, well, anybody who has a 6'11" guy, Carolina's not going to be able to beat. But it's like they have 6 or 7 really high-level players. They have 4 guys, more than likely, 3 or 4, depending on who you ask, who are going to play in the NBA soon. They're talented. They are experienced for the most part. They have a guy like Seth Trimble and they all have guys who've done it different ways. Like RJ Davis came in under a different coach as kind of a point guard, not a point guard, trying to figure out what to do. And then he kind of is unlocked last year as the shooting guard, and again had one of the best shooting seasons in UNC history. Cadeau comes in early, is kind of given the keys and isn't quite exactly sure what to do. He's figuring things out on defense. We've seen the jump from him. Trimble came in as like, oh, be defensive, happy to be here, defensive guy. And now he's saying, look, I can score too. So they've all come about different ways, but they all are very talented, I guess is my point. And when it gets back to UConn, it's like we're all looking at last year's UConn team and assuming that's what this year's UConn team is going to be, but they haven't played anybody, literally nobody. And that's no disrespect to, let me pull it up right here real quick, Sacred Heart, New Hampshire, Lamoni, if I'm even saying that right.
Lemoyne. Put some respect on
Lemoyne.
Lemoyne's name.
I'm sorry. And Justin's people down at Texas A&M Commerce. So, like, they haven't played anybody. They could be great. They could be, UConn of old. It's possible. But it's also possible that they're going to take a step back because you can't lose the caliber players they have over the years and just continue to be just as good, especially in a system where, they're not recruiting right now. They're not recruiting a ton of 5-star guys. They're recruiting players that are transfers from other schools and kind of incorporating them into the system. If you think that UConn is going to be great, I think it's because of the coach and the sets that he runs offensively, the cohesiveness, the demands of excellence that he has. So I think if you think UNC doesn't stand a chance against UConn, then I think you're saying it's a coaching thing. I'm saying I think if it were to get there, that UNC is just as talented, and the mismatches that UConn would have on one side, or that Carolina would have on one side, UConn would have on the other side too. So
right.
A long-winded 3-minute way of saying, yes, they could beat UConn. Is it going to happen? I don't know. They might not even play them, but they could.
Justin, when you guys went through these MTEs like this as a player, and by the way, I'm hearing Sherrell recite UConn's schedule thus far, and it sounds like some of those sisters of the poor comments that your old coach Roy Williams used to make all the time. But in a situation like this where you're in an MTA and you're kind of playing these stack games back to back, are you able to find a second gear when you see that that number one team across the bracket from you? I mean, a lot of times you guys were that number one team, but once in a while when you see a team that's probably getting a little more accolades than you, does that give you that little bit of extra juice even if you're on the third game in 3 days?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the year we were there, for us, it was Wisconsin was kind of that team that was, we kind of had our eyes on. So yeah, I mean, it definitely each game that goes by, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think going into this Dayton game, I think it's so easy to look over them and go right into the Iowa State, Auburn, and then if possible, UConn. But Dayton's not a slouch. Like I think that's what's so hard about these tournaments is you go into these games and as players, Coach Williams always did an unbelievable job of saying, "Hey, this is the most important game, this one that we're in." And if he ever noticed that it seemed like we were thinking about a different game, he would try to bring us all back in. But going against a Dayton team where it's like, okay, don't really know what they do, don't know much other than maybe the 5-minute scout that we might have before the game. Okay, we got to try and knock them out. Now, okay, well, now we're playing against either the fourth ranked team or the fifth ranked team. Okay, they're ranked ahead of us. So, hey, let's go out here and do this. Okay, now we're playing against the defending champs, who it's funny to listen to y'all talk about them because it's like, yeah, they played Sacred Heart, but they won 92-56. Like they played New Hampshire 92-53. Like they did exactly what they were supposed to do against these not as capable teams.
Not as gifted. We rip off Roy all the time on this show. Not as gifted.
Not as gifted. So it's kind of funny to me to kind of hear like UConn being the more underrated team out of all these. But yeah, I mean, you definitely you look ahead and you say, okay, these teams, we have to beat these teams if we want to make it to where we want to be, whether that's to win the championship in Maui or to win a championship in March. So, I think if they have that kind of sense of urgency and mentality, I think going into these games, then they're capable of beating any team. I mean, there's so many different ways to take advantage of the weaknesses, I guess I would say, of this team, whether that's the size or not. Okay, hey, y'all have 2 6'10" guys. Okay, let's bring y'all out onto the perimeter and let's see if y'all can guard on the perimeter with these 3 guards that we have that can get downhill at any time. And then defensively, you can do a bunch of different things. At the end of the day, basketball, you got to give up one thing, right? There's always one thing you got to give up. And so if that means, hey, we got to focus on the bigs down low and let's hope they don't knock down shots from the outside, then so be it. But yeah, you definitely you keep your eyes set on those big matchups, and you definitely get a little more fired up for those.
When I think about big matchups, I think about people rushing to Johnny T-shirt for Black Friday sales, and that's kind of, I guess that's kind of a given this time of year as well. Is the sales that Johnny T-shirt is going to offer to all of our great subscribers and listeners for all that they need for their holiday shopping. I've said it 1,000 times: if Johnny T-shirt don't have it, you don't need it. Johnny T-shirt is actually already running Black Friday sales. If you go to johnnytshirt.com, check them out right now. You can already start saving money. They'll have more for true Black Friday. So while you're thinking, as you're waiting up for these late starts this week, hey, go ahead and hit up Johnny T-shirt online. You'll be glad they did, and you'll be glad you did, and the people that you're buying for will be glad that you did. But we love Johnny T-shirt. They support all the stuff that we do here on IC. We want you guys to appreciate them as much as we do. Go see them, locally owned and operated, alumni owned and operated. Johnny T-shirt right there on East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Pause on the audio version. There will be some national ads that drop in right here, but on the video version, stick around. We'll talk a little bit more about this Maui tournament here. We're going to go full Thanksgiving, leaning into all of the cringe themes right after we come back. All right, Coast to Coast podcast. We're calling this our Maui preview spectacular to the max extreme super show. Because, it's Sean and Sherrell and I. Sean we don't like very much because he's actually in Maui as we record this. But Justin has taken some time out of his schedule to join us. So we're going to do a little special preview. Guys, I did some fun show prep to get us ready for the tourney this week. And because it's Thanksgiving, why not? Let's have fun with Thanksgiving themes. First things first, and I'll go to Sherrell since he's known me the longest. He knows my sense of humor. Sherrell, what's the most important ingredient for North Carolina this week as they head to Maui? And when I say ingredient, I mean statistic. So you tell me, what's the most important thing in Maui this week for the Tar Heels Thanksgiving recipe collection?
I would say their superpower is their offense. And so when you are that much better than most teams at your strength, I want to see that strength like enhanced, and I want to see you, um, kind of play to that strength. So I'm going to say, uh, if they can average, the most important ingredient is points per game, 88, 89. If they can be around their average, I think they'll play good enough defense considering the opponents they would play to have a really good outcome in Maui.
Justin, this phase of the season, how much does it actually help you to get to Thanksgiving a little early and play a game against Hawaii? So maybe in Thanksgiving terms, as you're getting there a little bit early, you're already having to deal with your uncle who's already going to get on your nerves, and your aunt who's going to try to make 80,000 recommendations about how you should be living. Does getting that extra game in Honolulu help you at all when you've got the Maui slate lined up right shortly thereafter?
Yeah, I mean, you get there, you're able to get used to the time change a little bit. You're able to get used to just being away, at that distance. I think too, it's big for guys like RJ, who we've been kind of waiting to get back into a rhythm. It gives you an extra game before you get into the tournament to kind of feel that out. Um, and then you just are able to stay fresh. It's hard to go a week with no games and go right into a tournament. Like that's pretty difficult. You can run all you want in practice and it's never going to match up to game type conditioning. So, it kind of keeps them, it's weird, but it keeps them fresh and keeps them, conditioned as much as possible. And so, yeah, I think a game like that is always big. For us, when we went, I was watching some clips. We played absolutely terrible. So maybe we got all the bad play out whenever we played against Hawaii, and then we were able to play better. But yeah, I think it's a big game to kind of get a little bit of a rhythm going.
So the gyms at the Lahaina Civic Center are notoriously soft. Do you like soft rims like that? Do you like playing in a high school style gym like that? Do you like playing in a place that feels like just a hot sauna where you're doing like hot yoga for two straight hours? What's that like?
I like soft rims. For my floater, it always helped out a whole lot. I don't like smaller gyms. That's why I never liked going to playing at Duke because it was basically a high school gym. So I'm not a big fan of that, but it's also a different environment and a different feel playing in Maui. It feels different than playing at somebody's home gym as opposed to, kind of it's just almost like a rec center type of feel to it. But I loved Maui. Maui was awesome. I loved the gym. The fans, that's what was so impressive with me was the amount of fans that came over for all the teams involved. So yeah, I don't have any real negative thoughts about Maui other than the locker room. Maybe we were just on some stone and some, uh, we were probably we were all basically shoulder to shoulder in the locker room. So that's probably my only negative with it.
I have a question for you too, Justin, since you're here. On the broadcast, and I think in general, the perspective on RJ Davis is yes, he's not playing, like he has shown that he can play. And one of the announcers, I forget which game it was basically like, well, they need to put the ball in his hands more and give him more to do. And I kind of said the same thing, but as I'm thinking about it, is that the right answer? Like, does it make it worse? Does it make him think about it more when you're like, all right, RJ, we're putting the ball in your hands because we know you're in a slump and go out there and do it? Does that make it worse or to just be like, just play your game?
I think it makes it worse on a couple of different levels. It makes it worse for him because now it's like, okay, I got to go make a play. But it also makes it worse for the team because now you're taking the ball out of the main playmaker's hands, which is Elliott at this point. Um, it's funny listening to people kind of talk about RJ because it's like, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit. This guy had a historic season last year, right? Like you can't necessarily replicate the kind of season that he had last year. So he set that bar. So now everybody expects it to be, hey, this is where RJ has to play at all times, or else we got to figure something out. And the reality of it is this team is just better. The players that are around him have gotten better. Elliott with the ball in his hands creates for so much more. It's not as if RJ's not getting enough touches or enough shots. He's just missing shots. That's just all it is. It's the way basketball works, right? You can't make everything you shoot. And so I think it's a matter of just, hey, just go out there and play. I think the first few games, from my experience, for the first few games that I was watching him play, he was just putting too much pressure on himself, right? And he was just expecting and thinking that he had to make a play at certain times, or he had to make this shot, as opposed to just being RJ, who can just go get a bucket whenever he wants, make plays for whoever. Um, so no, I don't think that's the right play, because I heard the same thing. I don't think the right play is, hey, now RJ, you get the ball, you bring it up every single time. No, I don't think that's it. I think you still keep the ball in Elliott's hands, and he's going to create and give unbelievable open looks for RJ. So now it's just a matter of RJ stepping into it and being who he is.
So sticking with kind of that theme, Sean, you wanted to add something about RJ? Because I was getting ready to ask, since we're talking about individual players, which player has to sit at the head of the table this Thanksgiving for North Carolina to have success in Maui? So Sean, you can either talk about RJ, or if you think it's somebody else, lean in, man.
That's a good question, and I'll put RJ at the head of the table, because I think if they're going to win a championship in Maui, maybe not revert to the full RJ of old, but he's going to need to shoot the ball well. I see him scoring 20 plus a game, especially in some of those bigger games, even with Elliott and everybody else picking their game up as well. But one thing for him, I know everybody is focused on the 3-point shooting and how poor that is right now, but he has a higher assist rate, lower turnover rate than he has in the past year. And you look at the Hawaii game, there's a play in the second half that stuck out when he got into the paint, kicked it out to Kate Tyson on the left wing, wide open. He just missed it, but there's an assist, and then there's another play down at the big. So he was creating open shots and doing things in rhythm. And I think for a guy like that, you could also just say, hey, I'm gonna try to go ISO and do my own thing. And he's still trying to play within the team system, and he's still getting shots up. So I'm going to put him at the head of the table, just because if they are to win, Elliott's going to have to play great, but RJ is going to most likely have to get in that 20 plus point game. But hopefully we're not seeing him play, that 37 minutes or whatever it was against Hawaii, and he is getting a little break, throughout the weekend.
All right, guys, we're going back for seconds here. What do you need more of out of this North Carolina team? Sherrell.
I'm sorry, you're catching me off guard. You really are leaning into the cheesy. Yeah, I think the obvious answer is rebounding. They were solid in the second half against Kansas. They were fine against American, against an overmatched opponent, and then they were struggled in the first half against Hawaii and were better in the second half. So more consistent rebounding from the bigs and avoiding foul trouble, because I think that was the main thing. They all got in foul trouble pretty quickly, which led to Hawaii kind of dominating on the glass for most of the game.
Justin, same thing. What do you want seconds of? What do you need to see more of out of this roster for the next 3 games?
More and more attacking. I think when you look at the free throws that they've been able to shoot, with a team that there's still question marks around shooting the ball, like who's really going to be knockdown shooters. If you're able to score at the free throw line at the rate that they're scoring, it's going to be hard to stop them. So I think it's just attacking, getting downhill. Once again, the guards, we probably are going to be sick by the end of the season talking about the guards, but the guards just attacking and putting pressure on the rim, which then allows drop off to bigs or kick out open threes, way more open than they would be. So I think that's what I want to see, attack.
Sean, take your plate back to Grandma and tell her one more thing you want more out of this team.
Well, with the attacking, for me, 3-point shooting over the last 3 games, 7.75 is the total number that they've hit. Always talk about 8+, so really want to see that. I thought it was good to, for Kate Tyson, especially that last 3 made off a transition, which can be a way for him to get open looks. I think the athleticism and physicality that some of these teams are going to have will make it challenging for him all weekend. But if you get 1 or 2 from me and 1 from Cade, it takes a little pressure off of RJ. And once again, if Elliott or Trimble can hit as well. So really for me, it's the outside shooting, which also goes into Withers. We talked about it last week, how it seemed he had found a role, right? Being able to hit from the corner, attack against Hawaii is a little bit of a struggle. So once again, if he's adding 1 or 2 in there as well, that's just going to free up the offense, and it's going to obviously help out a lot just with the quick points.
All right. So now, what's the potato salad with raisins in it, right? There's always the one thing that you want no part of that might be the kryptonite for the Thanksgiving meal. What's this team's kryptonite right now, Justin?
I think it goes back to what what he was just talking about from shooting. I think any team that's gone zone against North Carolina, it's kind of messed their flow up offensively. Now I think against Hawaii, you saw a lot of them being able to get the ball into the middle, and then you had cuts from the corner and kickouts and things like that. So it looked better against the zone. But if you have a team that's able to play a zone, that's able to cover up that middle and make you shoot from the outside, I think that's kind of where I'm, like I said, a big question mark for me. Are they going to be able to um, knock down shots from the outside? So I think that's where the head of the table for me and RJ and somebody who can knock down shots consistently that's proven it, I think is going to be really key. So I think that's what's going to be for me. I don't want to see a zone. Please don't throw a zone out there. Just play man to man and let our guards do what they're supposed to do.
Well, we do say on this show, Justin, you may appreciate this, that hashtag zone is for cowards because it's not real defense, but we'll stand by that. That's one of the tenets of Coast to Coast. Sean, what is your potato salad with raisins in it that you don't want this North Carolina team to see? What do you think their kryptonite is right now?
Well, it's what we saw against Hawaii from a defensive rebounding perspective, especially we're going to go against potentially Iowa State or Auburn, size and crashing the glass. I think you look at it, and between the bigs, they're not, getting super high above the rim. So you're going up in a crowd. That's where you need the guards coming down. You need 3 or 4 guys around it to get those loose balls. So that way, you're helping out Washington, you're helping out Lubin, et cetera, that they're going to be able to get a few, but you really need to crash the glass as a team, limit those offensive rebounding opportunities. We know, especially we all watch Justin and his teams, they were always number 1, number 2 offensive rebounding, right? And that just deflates a defense when you've worked hard to have a great defensive possession, and then all of a sudden you're giving up offensive rebound or getting that tap out, which UNC is famous for doing. So for me, it's how you're going to be limiting over 3 games the offensive rebounds for everybody else.
All right, Sherrell. Beans, greens, tomatoes, potatoes, turkey. Give me your Shirley Caesar, man. I need to know what this team needs to stay away from at this particular Thanksgiving feast they're having.
I mean, it seems obvious, but it's foul trouble for Elliot Cadeau. I mean, we've all seen the splits, the plus minus, all those things. I mean, there is a dramatic difference. It's not quite like this. I was listening to a show, and they had a stat that basically Nikola Jokic, he's so good that offensive efficiency-wise, when he's on the court, the Nuggets have the best offense right now ever through like 17 games. When he's off the court, they have right now the worst offense ever through like 15 games. Now, again, it's not that dramatic, but it is a pretty huge difference. So I love it. I like it that he's very aggressive on defense.
He's like plus 37 or something right now. It's absurd what his number is.
But there's sometimes when you're like, oh, okay, they're up 12. You don't need to go for that steal because the steal, a foul on you is much worse than, the benefit of getting a steal. So I think that's mine. It's just the foul trouble for him because he is the engine that makes UNC go. And it was a problem for him, I'd say, the first 10 or 12 games last season. But he's gotten better at it. But just after what happened against Hawaii, you don't want to see that against a better team.
Yeah, he hadn't been reaching as much earlier this year. And I think, to his credit, he did make a couple of really good reach-in plays where he didn't foul. But I guess you got to take the good with the bad there. All right, guys, before we get out of here, I got to give a shout-out to my friends over at Congruity, Matt at congruityhr.com. Hit him up. Matt will take care of your business. You will be thankful that they are giving you ways that you can save money for your business. You'll see what I did there? You'll say, thanks, Matt, for giving us ways to save money at your small or medium-sized business. Congruity's great. They will take care of you as far as your payroll, your benefit solutions, all of the HR functions that you don't want to spend time on as a small or medium-sized business owner. You can focus on making money. Let them focus on the other stuff. Email Matt at congruityhr.com. If they can't help you, they'll tell you they can't help you. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's free, so you're not losing anything by doing it. And who knows, maybe next year, 2025 is your year because Congruity will be on your team, and you'll be talking about all the winning you're going to be doing. So make sure you hit Congruity up. They'll take care of you. All right. This is going to be our pushing ourselves away from the table. What is success for UNC this week? So we'll say the good Thanksgiving trip for UNC includes blank. Sean, hit me.
I mean, you got to go with a championship. Looks great, but marquee wins. Right now, obviously that win or lose against Dayton. It's Iowa State, Auburn, and that's a must win in my opinion to have one of those marquee wins. Now, I mean, we've seen how the ACC has fared the first few weeks, and outside of Duke and even Pittsburgh lost today, so there's not going to be a lot of those marquee wins you're going to get in conference. So this is a great opportunity, but really that Iowa State Auburn game, because you don't know who you're going to get on the other side of the bracket in that third game, and that could mean a lot at the end of the year, or it could just be a win that isn't accounting for anything. So marquee wins for me, but obviously a championship or getting to the championship game would be what I would love to see.
Sherrell, I'm going to actually let our guest have the final word, so you got to jump in now, man. What is success for you this week? And it doesn't have to be wins or losses. I mean, I think that's an easy way to go, but what else is it that you need to see this week to consider that, oh man, this is a good trip for the Tar Heels?
Well, fun fact, Justin Jackson was on the last Carolina team to win an MTE. So
he was.
It's been a while. They're kind of due.
Did you just call Justin old?
No.
I think you just called Justin old, man.
Low key. But it's all good. Go ahead.
If Justin's old, then I'm ancient. So, but yeah, I think 2 wins from a perspective. 2 wins would be great. Dayton, you think will probably be a Q1 win. I think top 50 neutral court is a Q1 win, and if they were to beat either Iowa State or Auburn, you think more than likely that would be a Q1 win as well. So that's 2 right there just from one tournament in 2 days. So they can come out of there 2-1, not being embarrassed in whatever loss they have, then I think it's a good week. And no injuries.
Yeah, well, there's always that. All right, Justin, we appreciate you joining us, man. This has been fun leaning into it. I'm going to ask you, is it ship or bust for this team, or do you think there can be some positives to glean even if they don't cut down the nets?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this early in the season, I don't think it's ever the end of the world. But I think having that mindset of, hey, if we come out of here with anything less than a championship, I think that's the right mindset to have. But kind of to your point of the marquee wins, I think that's really, really big. For me, I think it's even a little bit less for me. I just want to see consistency, right? I just want to see guys like RJ kind of get on a consistent rhythm. I want to see maybe Cade Tyson kind of get onto a shooting rhythm a little bit. Ian and Drake a little more consistent, whether it's minutes or scoring the ball or whatever it might be, just some more consistent flow. Because going into once you get into ACC play, the consistency has to be there. You can't be up and down. You can't have one half and then the next half not be good. So I think going into kind of this first game against Dayton, just playing 2 full halves of basketball and carrying that over into whatever other matchups they might have. But for me, I'm looking for this team to make a run in this tournament and possibly win it. I mean, I don't see why they can't. I don't see why, there's certain weaknesses and matchups that might be a little tougher, but there's also certain things that they can take advantage of those weaknesses on the other end. So me personally, I think a championship is where they should be, but I just want to see the consistency.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of times on the show earlier this year about playing these marquee matchups. It's great for your strength of schedule and for that 3-letter abbreviation that determines tournament seeding that shall not be mentioned. But I think it's really important that North Carolina win a couple of these, and they're going to have their chances. They acquitted themselves well at Kansas. Granted, couldn't quite pull it out, but they'll have a chance this week to absolutely turn some heads and really get some momentum started. Guys, I appreciate it. This has been fun. I feel fat and happy, and who knows, maybe it's just because I'm fat and happy, or maybe it's because we talked about Thanksgiving. I don't know. But this has been a good episode. I hope that all of you guys have a great Thanksgiving wherever you're going to be, except for you, Sean. We don't really care for you very much because you're in Maui, but I do hope that you return safely and that you guys enjoy your trip. If you're traveling and you're listening to my voice, hopefully you guys get where you're going and take care of yourselves and get a chance to love on your family and whatnot. Family's important, so make sure you get all the hugs you can. Shout out to the UNC women's basketball team. They will be playing for the championship in the Battle for Atlantis, which I think will be tomorrow as we're recording this on a Sunday evening. So make sure you get a chance to root for them if you see them. But guys, it's been fun. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and to Gagruti for sponsoring. Shout out to Justin Jackson for guesting tonight. And for Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan, I am Joey Powell. This has been a special episode of the Coast to Coast Feast Week Extravaganza Maui Invitational Super Show to the Extreme Max Edition. We'll talk to y'all sometime very soon. Happy Thanksgiving.